Hello and welcome back to Azure Terraform. This is part 3 of my code review of my first Azure Terraform project that a friendly internet stranger provided for me for review. So I'm very excited. And what would a review be without a good old-fashioned refactoring session? So today I thought I would refactor this code base and share with you the results. Of course, I've changed the names to protect the innocent, and there's nothing proprietary in here. This is a pretty standard app service, web app, SQL DB deployment, so I think we're all good there. But anyways, I'm going to talk out loud. I'm going to do some coding, and we're gonna be off to the races. But before I do, I'd just like to remind you, if you like my channel and you like my content, please like and subscribe, and make sure you ring that bell so that you know when I drop my next video. And without further ado, let's get started. So I have the original code here, just that I'm going to keep for posterity. But I've organized the code into this folder called refactored. And so this is really where I'm going to start. And if you recall, we have some root modules. We have this main under shared, the shared root module, which is our shared infrastructure. And then we have the client modules that all deploy this main module down here. So the naming is a little bit funny and the organization's a little bit funny. The fact that these main and shared are kind of in the root folder imply that they're root modules. So I'm just gonna first off, I'm gonna move them into the modules folder because they are modules the way that they're being used. They're just much more opinionated modules, which is fine, but they are modules nonetheless. Then what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to rename the module, and we'll just rename the main module, call this client deployment, and then we'll call this shared infra. Makes it a little bit more clear what's happening there. Of course, shared infra is not really reusable, but shared infra, so this folder right here is actually shared infra. But this shared infra module is just referencing our new modules, shared infra module. So we have a root module, and this is going up some folders, and it's going up 2 folders, and then we're going to go into the shared infra module folder. And then these client guys, they're no longer using main, they're using client deployment module, which seems a little bit more clear on what is happening here. Okay, so that's a thing. Now that I've kind of restructured the modules, so all modules are in this modules thing, and I've got this. I don't like this clients folder. I'm not too keen on having the clients have individual root modules, and I explained why in a previous video. So, absent of a really compelling use case why I would want to maintain those environments, I'm going to refactor those clients into my actual deployment. And we're going to see what's going to happen when I have multiple clients being deployed using the same client deployment module. I can, because the client deployment module is already set up properly, I can use that module in the same way that it's being used here. However, I need to do a little bit of work to clean this up. So I'm going to go and put a folder here called Terraform. I'm going to treat this like it's the root, of my code base. So I'm going to create a shared infra. So this is a root deployment, as evidenced by the provider block and all that stuff. And then I'm going to have client infra, and that's going to have its own folder as well. Okay. And so for the time being, I'm going to leave client 1 and client 2. I'm just going to organize it around these 2 root modules. So to stub out a root module, I need a versions. These are the basic files that I should have in every Terraform solution that I have. So I'm just going to add a couple down here. Now for my shared infra, I'm going to move the provider content into the correct folder. So I have my required providers block. I've got all this stuff. I'm going to remove the back end here. And actually for this demo, I'm not going to use a back end. But the way I would have left the back end is I would have removed all of these properties from the back end and passed those in using Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions or something like that as parameters to make this code base as portable as possible. So if I want to take this code base, deploy it someplace else, deploy it with a totally different backend state, I can do that. I just pass in the variables and tell it where to go and have a good time. So, but I'm not going to be deploying backend because I'm just going to be deploying locally. Okay, so I like this. Variables, undetermined if we actually have variables yet. Bunch of extra white space, not really sure what that's all about. Now the paths are probably incorrect. So the nice thing about always putting your root modules in the same location and always putting your modules in the same location is you don't have to do a bunch of mental gymnastics to figure out what the relative path is going to be. So in this situation, now I am in, where am I? I'm in the shared infra folder here. I'm going to go up one folder, and that's going to put me in the Terraform folder. And then in the Terraform folder, I have the modules folder. And then from there, I can get whatever module I want. In this case, I'm getting shared infra. And inside the modules folder, you can structure that however you want. If you want to create a folder for components of your solution, you can create like a subfolder called components. If you want to create a folder for deployments, you can do that so that they don't mix in with more resource level modules. But I'm not gonna like rename. I'm not gonna restructure the folder structure just yet because I kind of want to see what shakes out. Because I have a feeling that some of these resource modules aren't gonna live very long. So anyways, I've got my shared infra, okay, and we're in pretty good shape there. Now let's just go and try and test our shared infra. Okay, so we're going to create a random password. We're going to create a virtual network, an app service plan. Looking at my plan, I don't like my resource group name. I don't like, it's just called shared RG. I don't like the name of my app service plan. So we're going to start off with introducing some variables even to our shared infra. Now I'm going to give the application name a default by creating a terraform.tfvars file because I don't expect the application name to change that much. And what are we going to call this? This is going to be a short prefix that we give to our resources within this solution. Now, of course, this is shared infra. We kind of need to give this a name that would imply shared infra. So I'm actually probably going to start with a moniker for the application itself. We'll call this CR3 core, but my friendly internet stranger, he likes shared. So let's call this CR3 shared, and we'll keep that naming convention going here. All right, so now I'm also going to add an environment name. And even if you only ever plan to have one environment and it's going to be prod, it's good to throw in, an environment name here because you never know. You might want to create a stage environment where you test stuff out, or a dev environment where you test a new feature, or whatnot. So I think it's a good practice to start embedding these two aspects into all of your solutions, all of your resource names, at the root module level. So at the root module level, you should have the concept of application name. You should have the concept of environment name, with the idea being an application name uniquely identifies that service or thing, whether it's a backend API or a web front end or everything in between. This system has a name. And that's what I'm calling application name. The environment is a copy of that system for a specific purpose. Production is to actually handle production traffic and be used by the end user. Test would be an environment that is intended to be used by your testers or your QA staff or anybody that's going to be performing test workloads on it to try and mimic production. Whether it's functional or load or performance testing or whatever. And then dev for developers to go monkey around in there. So these two aspects, I don't think are ever optional if you think about it. Every environment, no matter how big or small, no matter how many environments you plan on using, it's good to embed this construct into your structure. We have this main module, and it does not have any concept of the application name or the environment name. So we're gonna have to fix that. That's a relatively easy thing. We just copy pasta, and we can put these very important names here. And we're gonna replace some of these more resource specific names. So at the root module, you're gonna have input variables that are more deployment oriented. At a resource level module or something like that, you're gonna have input variables that are more oriented to that particular resource. That makes sense. It's not a good thing to have resource oriented variables at the deployment level. Because you're gonna see like a whole bunch of variables, and you see this on many ARM templates. They just have top level input parameters for like the name of everything within the ARM template. It's really annoying. Rather than taking a name prefix and then propagating that to make the names on all of the relative items, it just creates an extremely complex interface for that module. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead, get rid of the shared RG name because at this level, I'm deploying shared infrastructure. I don't even want to give a specific name to the resource group. Like the name of the resource group for this environment should be, there should be logic that builds that based on these inputs that I'm providing it, application name and environment name. So I'm going to go here, and again, we already have hard-coded embedded stuff here, which that's going to go bye-bye. The shared RG name is also going to go bye-bye. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put RG, and then I'm going to put var.application name. The location's fine. Now, one thing that you want to do is if you're going to be using the location from the resource group, you should make it a practice to pipe in the resource group location and not just use the input variable. It's a small nit, but it will be important for the future of this resource such that you know that these two resources, the app service plan and the resource group, are tied together. So again, this being probably the only resource group that I'm going to deploy in this module, I'm just going to change this to main. And we're going to get rid of the hyphens because it just makes it difficult to name things. And now I've got a nice name on my resource group. My app service plan, I'm only going to do one app service plan. That's it. I'm going to get rid of company. I'm assuming this was where my friendly internet stranger was trying to kind of abstract the actual company details from it, or maybe that's a client name, I don't know. But the location of the app service plan, it's not bad, particularly if we want this shared infra to be stamped out for multiple locations. So if that's the case, I might actually include that in the resource group name and the app service plan. Depends on how I want to organize the app, the scale out. Do I want an individual resource group for each app service plan? Probably. So looking at that, how the location was already embedded in the app service plan name, I think I'm probably going to also append that to the resource group, so that when we stamp this out, stamp this environment out, we are going to have the fully qualified path of the application name, the environment name, and the location name. And this goes from bigger to smaller, right? We're only going to have one application with this application name. That application is going to have one or more environments, and then each environment is going to have one or more location. That's it. That's how you can read this. So it's kind of like a postal address. The structuring of your naming convention you should think about it like that. So my SQL Server database is probably going to follow the same thing. I'm going to have only one of those things in this module, and I'm going to embed this the naming here as well. So we're just going to call this SQL and that big long string. And we've got this administrator login and this password, which I'm fine with. We probably, again, we're repeating the name of the resource in the object reference. So I'm just going to call this MS SQL Server. And that's going to be the MS SQL Server password. So I now have value out of the object reference rather than just repeating the name. And what I'm going to do is in the shared infra, I'm actually going to move the SQL Server into its own file and just keep that stuff separate. So this password and the SQL Server reference, I'm just going to move that out there. And all this stuff is going to be together. And I think I might just like group these together so that we have a nice scrimmage line here. And so that leaves the app service plan and the network in the main file, which I think is fine. If we were to go and do a whole bunch of new stuff to the virtual network, I might go split that out into its own little network thing. But it doesn't look like we're doing that. So again, I'm going to change that. This is my only VNet that I'm going to have because I only plan to have one VNet per region. And so I'm just going to update this. I'm going to change the prefix and we're going to be good to go. And so now I need to fix my references, and I need to fix the reference to the location because this thing is going to be tied to the resource group location. And if you have a dependency, where you have this resource, you're actually going to be deploying to the location of this resource group, make sure you use that resource reference so that Terraform, when it does its execution plan, it knows there's a dependency between those two things. So, you get one here with the resource group name. So at the very least, Terraform does know that there's a dependency in the resource group name, but it's generally good practice, like if, not to use the variable input and to opt to use the resource reference of the parent or the dependee resource that you're depending on, so that you can make sure that Terraform picks up the relationship between the two resources. So there we go. So I've got a network, I've got an app service plan, I've got a resource group, I've got my MySQL server. I'm having a good old time, and we're outputting these things. There we go. So yeah, I think I'm good to go here. So now let's look at this stuff. Now the last thing that I might do, because this is shared infra, and I may want to have more than one of these regions deployed somewhere, is I may just set up a little array and create n number of these based on the regions that I want to pass in. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a locals. Now this is in my root module, right? This is in my root module. So my shared module is deployed into a single region. And everything is based on the assumption that we're in that single region. That's it. So I can just call this like supported regions, and then we'll create like an array. And each supported region, I need to have an address space, and I need to have a location. Of course, I should probably spell location correctly. And I'm just going to copy pasta the values for the one that I have. Now, I'm not a huge fan of /16, but what are you going to do? And so now what I'm going to do is, okay, I have n number of supported regions. I'm going to set the count on this to the length of my local.supported regions. And then I'm going to go grab the correct value for this, count.index, and we're going to pass in the address space. And then we're going to pass in the location. And this is going to set me up for in the future when I actually want to have more regional deployments for this shared infrastructure. And because this module is actually now, I think the manifest destiny for this module is actually becoming clear. This module is in fact a regional deployment of our shared infrastructure, right? So I think I might want to just rename this like, and then the actual shared infrastructure root module now becomes kind of the multi-region deployment mechanism for our single region deployment module. And then of course I'd probably write some documentation to imply that as well. And the variables for these modules make sense. The multi-region module, has the application environment name, very high level, topics. Within this module, we maintain the collection of regions that we want to deploy. So we have code that maintains that. Now, could you pass that in as input variables? Sure. In this case, the nature of this module is to maintain what regions you're supporting. So I might just leave this configuration embedded as local variables rather than set them as input variables, because the nature of this module is to provision what's ever in the supported regions collection. If I were to, there's not a whole lot of value in extracting that to make this more generic, because kind of if I did that, then this would cease to be a root module. It would be a reusable module, which I suppose I could just do the same thing and then dump this into here and just call this shared infra multi-region. And then my root module becomes even more thin. But then you got to ask yourself, well, am I ever going to reuse the multi-region module? Probably not. So in this case, I've already got pretty clean code in the multi-region deployment, and in my single region deployment, I'm pretty happy with the way it is. So I'm probably just going to leave it like that. So let's try this again. Oh yeah. So we have a whole bunch of outputs here, right? And well, the question is, why do we have all these outputs? They were actually being used by the shared state. So with the shared state no longer being used as the mechanism for passing these values along, I think we can just go ahead and delete these. Like I don't think we really need these output variables. Who are we outputting them to? Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Okay, so I think I'm pretty good here. So let's just get rid of those outputs. I could have refactored those outputs to actually spit out some stuff. But again, I put an outputs.tf there as a placeholder and as a convention. But if you're not going to output anything, don't output anything. Do things with intention. So let's see what we're deploying. So we have RGCR3 shared prod North Central US. Okay. And we've got a VNet and an app service plan. So we're cruising along with the deployment here. So that's it for our shared infrastructure. In the next episode, we're going to continue our refactoring and look at our client infrastructure. I hope you join me then. And if you're enjoying this series, please like and subscribe and ring that bell. And if you have Azure Terraform code, submit it to me. I will review it and I will refactor it and show you the way. Anyways, that's it from me and the Azure Terraformer signing off.